It is Friday, and we are working for Crusoe. We are back. It is Friday, July 18th, 2025, in still occupied Los Angeles. He is Sam Park. Also in Los Angeles, I am John Ramey. Today, we will discuss, after our 2-week hiatus, the Middle East, Ukraine, and the latest regarding the U.S. economy, the Fed, whether President Trump will fire Powell, tariffs, inflation. Really kind of a grab bag. This is a working for Crusoe bingo card episode, actually, I think.
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, for instance, in the tariffs story, President Trump, among other things, has threatened to levy a tariff strictly on Mexican tomatoes. So this is just one of many elements of these stories with which we'll need to catch up.
Well turned.
Thank you. But the point is that each one of the topics we're going to cover today is very complicated and will merit more discussion than we're able to provide it with. So there will be, I just want to warn all of our lovely listeners that we're going to miss elements of each one of these stories, and so we need to apologize just for those lacunae.
Right. You'll need to do the reading beyond just listening to the lecture.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. We'll start in the Middle East. Washington Post reporting, Israel launched a wave of strikes on Syria this week, which hit the presidential palace and defense ministry in Damascus. Israel said the attacks were meant to protect Syria's Druze minority. The Israeli intervention stemmed from a sectarian conflict on Syria's southern border. See the map we put up here, where Druze and Bedouin groups have clashed. The Syrian Foreign Ministry, remember, brand new government in Syria. The Syrian Foreign Ministry described the Israeli strikes as part of a, quote, deliberate policy, end quote, on the part of Israel to, quote, inflame tensions, spread chaos, and undermine security and stability in Syria, end of quote. The Druze are a minority religious sect with populations spanning Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel. The group has roots in Islam, although it also integrates teachings from other religions and follows a distinctive theology of its own, developed over centuries. The group's most revered religious figure is Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Some 150,000 Druze live in northern Israel. Unlike Palestinian citizens of Israel, Druze in Israel must serve in the Israeli military. More than 20,000 Druze live in the occupied Golan Heights, annexed by Israel in 1981. Many of the Druze in the Golan Heights view themselves as Syrian rather than Israeli. I'm finding this one bewildering, Sam.
As well you should. And I should say also that this is easily the most complicated story that we're going to be talking about today. But we can break it down into a few core elements.
I shouldn't be smiling at this. It's terrible. Like, this is more war.
Yes.
But it's just what, arcane? Is that the right word? I'm like, really?
It's very fun. When I say it's inside baseball, I mean it's
very
deep inside.
I mean, the Druze have not come up on working for Crusoe to this point.
That's not true. We have talked about
the Druze?
Yes. In some of our other Middle East related stories.
I mean, they're like, they're kind of like a more indie Kurd. Right?
Yes, that's right. There's far fewer of them, and they do occupy numerous countries, but it's a very small group. They're very exclusionary.
Yeah, they don't accept converts. That's great.
That's right. They don't accept converts, and they frown deeply on intermarriage. And I would imagine that some of the Lebanese Druze are a bit more relaxed about intermarriage, but that's just a guess. I don't actually know.
And is that just because of the cosmopolitan makeup of Lebanon?
Of Lebanese society, exactly. Right. But I'm glad that you mentioned that they're, in fact, an offshoot of an offshoot of an offshoot of the Muslim faith. So
well, the Washington Post, to be fair.
But to the degree that they no longer, in fact, consider themselves Muslim. And I think this is part of the story here. In other words, in the conflict between the Druze and the Bedouin tribes in southwestern Syria, there's been bloodletting on both sides, just awful.
And the Bedouins are Sunni, correct?
Yes, they are, as is the new government of Syria, who in fact got their start as a very militant Islamic jihadist group, right? And so they might not have been the best people to try and intervene in this sort of intertribal conflict on their own territory. But because it is on their own territory, they're the ones who it's their sovereign territory. They're the ones who have to try and put this down. I should mention also that this is a story that's evolving as we're recording this episode. So there will be things that will happen today that might render some of our commentary moot. But in the conflict between the Bedouin and the Druze, once the Syrian so-called army got there, which are really mainly former jihadist militia,
who happened to win the civil war in Syria.
That's right.
Are now the de facto state.
Yes. And just by sort of culture, are just more likely to take the side of the Bedouin tribesmen, their fellow Sunni Muslims. Right. If your background is Sunni jihadist, you actually pretty much should view the Druze as heretics, which in fact is worse than being an out-and-out infidel, right? And so the idea, and this is rather well documented, is that some of the Syrian troops actually took the side, and predominantly took the side of the Bedouin tribesmen. This necessitated, or not necessitated, but this occasioned the involvement of Israel, who, by the way, has never stopped attacking Syria since the fall of the former dictator Bashar al-Assad last December. They've been launching strikes mainly in that southwestern region, right across the border from the Golan Heights, ever since that government fell. And they've, in fact, insisted that the areas in that region should be demilitarized. Now, what business is this of theirs? Of course, that is on their
right
border.
Next door.
I mean, fine, sure. But it's a sovereign country,
right?
You don't get to decide, how other countries administer their own territory.
That's
much
right.
less, by the way, bomb the defense ministry and the area around the presidential palace.
Okay, so I agree with that assessment. I want to zoom out a little bit about Israel.
Yes, I think that's wise.
Okay. As I've understood it in my life, which has been going on since the back end of the 20th century, the last quarter of the 20th century, the whole, or rather the purported reason Israel is our ally in the Middle East is because it's the only nation that reflects our, we'll just call them Western or liberal values, in that they have elections. There's a democracy, is a Western style democracy, and that they are an oasis of sanity in the otherwise insane Middle East that is filled with chaos and ancient grudges and unending violence and unending war.
That's the story. Let's put it
so
that way.
Then when Israel bombs Syria on behalf of the Druze, it makes me doubt that story. This seems to be sowing chaos and kicking up more violence. I mean, look, if you're a Druze being attacked by a Bedouin Sunni, it's plenty violent already. I'm not saying that violence doesn't count. But now the biggest U.S. ally is just piling on. I'm struggling to make sense of this.
Well, I mean,
and it cuts at the whole, or at the purported rationale for our alliance with them.
And this is one of the many complexities of this story. For example, one thing that I haven't heard anybody say during this whole week of awful, ghastly violence is that were it not for Israel's, let's be frank, expansionist policies since October 7th, Ahmed al-Sharaa probably would not today be the president of Syria. It's only because Iran's other proxies in the region and Bashar al-Assad himself, the former dictator, have been so weakened, as has Iran itself, that Sharaa was able to take over the country. And now we can understand why he might not want to mention that today, sure, right? But that's part of what's going on here, right? Now, yesterday, it seemed like there might be a ceasefire, right? Marco Rubio, sitting in the Oval Office with President Trump and other members of the cabinet, said that there had been what he called a misunderstanding between Israel and Syria. And what happened was that Israel insisted, after bombing parts of Damascus, that the Syrian military should withdraw from Suwaida and the surrounding region in southwestern Syria. And it seemed as though the Syrians agreed to this, right? I want to just emphasize this, right? Israel seemed to dictate the terms under which Syria could administer its own territory. And even though al-Sharaa and other members of his government objected and said that Israel was trying to destabilize their country and the region, they acceded to this demand. Today, however, it looks like that might be off. And again, we don't exactly know. There's a lot of conflicting reports coming out as we speak. But the violence between the Bedouin and the Druze has flared back up. And so at this point, it seems as though Syria might be sending their troops back in with the sort of rationale that, okay, you wanted us to withdraw. We did, but that's not solved the problem. All right. Are you, Israel, going to send ground troops in to take care of this? I kind of don't think you are. It sort of seems to me like you're kind of busy with your troops in other places.
Right.
And so what do you expect if you don't want us to take care of this and you're not going to take care of it? It's just going to be intercommunal bloodletting that goes on unchecked. And basically, that's where we're at right now.
Again, it's terrible, but I'm struggling to understand what concern it is of the Israelis about the Druze that don't live in Israel.
Well, I mean, I think a cynical observer might say that it's just a land grab. Okay. Israel, in fact, has pushed further into Syria from the Golan Heights. And never mind that the Golan Heights is still officially disputed.
Sure.
They've essentially said, no, the Golan is ours, and we're in fact going to push into Syria beyond the Golan Heights.
So
which they have done.
If we somehow could divorce ourselves from the moment of what Israel policy has been in the region generally, you might say, that's too cynical, or no, there's a different explanation. But when you contextualize that with what's been going on illegally in the West Bank and in Gaza, it seems like just a natural extension of a general policy.
Absolutely. And by the way, once again, the furthest right members of the Israeli government are very explicit about this in their designs for what they call a greater Israel. That includes parts of southern Lebanon, the entirety of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and parts of southern Syria, right? They have an explicit expansionist agenda. Now, that's not the entire Israeli government, by the way.
No,
all right?
I understand.
But it is serving ministers in the government who say these sorts of things very openly.
Have Sunni Bedouin committed acts of terrorism upon Israelis or in Israel?
Not that I'm aware of.
To the best of our knowledge,
like it never happened.
Sure, but there's not like a Bedouin Hamas-like entity that Israel can say we're securing ourselves or we're protecting our citizens.
Not that I'm aware of. Okay. No. But while we're looking at the broader context, another thing that happened this week is that two ultra-Orthodox parties left the Israeli government, and so the Netanyahu government,
for not being conservative enough, for not being far right enough,
for agreeing to conscript ultra-Orthodox citizens of Israel who have up till now been
Not,
exempt from military service, unlike almost everybody else in Israel,
including the Druze.
including the Druze. And so they've left the government on these grounds. So Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, now heads a minority government. Now, these parties did not, and very pointedly, I might add, did not threaten to bring the government down, right? That is, they will not call a vote of no confidence. They're simply leaving the governing coalition. And so, again, very cynical people would say, oh, well, Netanyahu is just trying to extend the war in order to keep himself in government. I think in part that's true, but I think Netanyahu has many different motivations for wanting to continue the war. Another thing that's been happening is that the Israeli military has suddenly begun to apologize for certain things that they're doing. That, for instance, more people have been killed in Gaza lining up to get food, right, including numerous children. And just for some reason, this past week, the military's actually apologized for that, saying, "Oh, this or that particular incident, oh, that was a mistake. We're sorry. We didn't mean to do it. We're going to launch an investigation." This has been going on for months, right? And so suddenly it's a problem. And one of the things that's been happening.
Well, they bombed a Catholic church, Sam.
That's true. And
in Gaza. And it got the Pope all riled up. And so then Netanyahu says, oh, we're going to investigate this. Israel deeply regrets.
Exactly. Right. Now, but that's the government. I'm talking about the military. That is the IDF.
The IDF issued an apology?
That's right. And off the record, people in the IDF will say, again, they won't give their names, but there's no actual military purpose left to achieve in Gaza. Right.
It's a wasteland.
Yeah, exactly. They've already begun demolishing whole areas of it. But it's the civilian leadership of the government, that is the civilian military leaders, who are really driving the policy.
And these would be the hard-line far-right people.
Yes, exactly. And so they're the ones who are really driving all of this. And it's very unstable, but the momentum of it is very clear. The people are being killed and driven off their land in the West Bank every day, right? The depredations of Gaza are well documented, but it's ongoing every day, and it's not getting any better.
Can we fold the increasing illegality and expansionism of Israel into the larger post-American hegemony in the world, like we can with the Russian expansionism or any potential Chinese expansionism? Will we look back on this? I mean, we can't know, but will we look back on this in decades and say, oh, look, when the United States stopped being serious about running the world and managing international affairs, all these countries like Russia, like China, we suspect, and like Israel just decided to play empire?
Yeah, I think that's a large part of it.
Is that too reductionist, or is that kind of what's happening?
The point I would make is that it doesn't matter if it's too reductionist or not, right?
Because it's happening.
People will say that's what happened, and they will have legitimate arguments to make in support of that thesis. And it'll be difficult, I would say, to talk them out of it because, again,
I mean, look,
a lot of evidence that they can offer to back it up. If I'm Benjamin Netanyahu today, I would be very justified in thinking that Trump will basically, not just Trump, but especially Trump, he'll basically let me do whatever I want, right? And maybe he'll, rein me in here or there. For instance, the Israeli intelligence came out this week and said, "Oh yeah, we probably didn't get all of the enriched uranium," right? Which is in direct contradiction of what Trump himself has said. But they're trying to just leave that in their pocket, right? It's just like, oh well, we might need to go and get the remaining uranium, right? Trump will probably let them do that too, right? And so, if Netanyahu thinks he can pretty much do whatever he wants, he's not wrong.
I'm just saying in 10 years, if China's got Taiwan and Russia's got half of Ukraine and Israel's got part of Syria and all the West Bank and Gaza and the rest of it, it's kind of obvious what happened.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I mean, the United States has basically stood up and said, we don't care, right? We don't actually care what happens in any place, where we've got these sort of legacy commitments that will kind of, go through the motions of honoring, right? But we don't really care to be invested in any of these areas at all.
Speaking of people we once said we'd have their back, and now it's to be determined, Ukraine. ABC News reporting from London that Russia's defense ministry said its forces shot down at least 143 Ukrainian drones on Wednesday night through to Thursday afternoon, with at least 3 craft intercepted over the capital Moscow and the region. The attack was Ukraine's largest drone barrage into Russia since it launched 167 craft into the country on July 11th. According to data published by Russia's defense ministry and analyzed by ABC News. The latest attack saw drones downed over 11 Russian regions, plus annexed Crimea, according to the Russian ministry. They said that yesterday. Temporary flight restrictions were introduced at Moscow's Vnukovo airport and another airport to the southwest of the capital, and a third airport in St. Petersburg, according to Telegram posts from a spokesperson for Russia's Federal Aviation Agency. I mean, that's a big deal. If Ukraine is attacking again inside of Russia and 3 airports are having to stop service, that's hugely disruptive, even if it's not like, I don't know about the tactical success of the mission, but Ukraine is projecting power into Russia.
Well, yes, but while we've been away for a string of many days in a row, Russia was launching its largest aerial attacks of the war so far.
Because Trump's given them 50 days to rain hell on Ukraine.
This is actually before he had done that, but yes, leading up there too, right? In fact, this was what prompted our president to say that he was very disappointed in Vladimir Putin, which I think is sort of a shame because I don't think Putin's disappointed in him at all. But this seemed to at least mark a partial rhetorical shift from Trump, right? Where it's, he at least proved himself willing to say something not entirely positive about Putin, right? And in fact, he said, he says all these nice things, but then he turns around and attacks all these cities. Just like, I'm glad you picked up on that.
Oh, you noticed that. Yeah.
But still, right? He's given him 50 days, which was supposedly 10. He extended that deadline 10 days after privately giving 60 or privately being requested 60 days from Putin himself on one of their several phone calls. So basically, he's given Putin his 60 days, but he's just saying, oh, wow, I'm not very happy with them. But the other important development that's happened while we were away is that Trump has allowed for the first time in his second term American weapons to be sent to Ukraine. And the way this is working is that European nations are actually sending American weapons that they already have and replenishing their own stockpiles with American weapons that they are purchasing. And I've had to really give credit to the European High Commissioner for Foreign Relations, Kaja Kallas, who said, it seems to me that if we're giving them our weapons and buying the replacement weapons, we're the ones providing the weapons, which is basically true. And,
again, let's reemphasize that. Buying the weapons. This is not charity from the United States.
Exactly.
This is
manufacturing
and exports.
That's right. And it's not actually providing aid, right? It's just a commercial transaction, essentially, right? But the Europeans couldn't have done this without U.S. approval, right? And so that's the important part here, which is good. Ukraine desperately needs those weapons, right? Because they're mainly Patriot missile air defense units, which, is if they had more of those, they could fend off a lot of these just unbelievably large aerial attacks that they're getting at the hands of the Russians right now.
So CNN reporting Russia is thought to be days or weeks away from surging into a heightened summer offensive, perhaps using the 160,000 troops Ukrainian officials have said are amassing near their front lines. But in the past 2 weeks, Russia has also made small but vital advances, placing its forces in a better position to cut off Ukrainian troops in 3 key towns on the eastern front line. We'll show the map here. I am not going to attempt to pronounce these towns, but you can see on the map the eastern front line. So it's funny. You could read about the history of war, and things have changed, obviously, over the centuries. But summer's still the best time to campaign. It's still the best. It's like it's war season.
Yes.
Anything else on Ukraine, or should we pivot to?
We're going to have to return to it, obviously, in future weeks. So I think we could probably move on for the time being.
Okay, Reuters reporting from Washington. This is Howard Schneider. The case for a U.S. interest rate cut remains unresolved as Federal Reserve officials head into their policy meeting later this month, with data showing fresh signs of higher inflation, and President Donald Trump intensifying his demands for lower borrowing costs. So higher inflation, yet Trump is demanding lower rates. Trump appeared near the point of trying to fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell this week, but backed off with a nod to the market disruption that would likely follow, as indicated by this handy graphic. Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
And the U.S. Central Bank's policy rate outlook remains virtually unchanged despite the drama. On Friday, the president repeated his criticism of Powell, that is today, and said the Fed's policy rate should be 1%, a low level typically used by the Fed to boost a weak economy, not, as the Fed is currently attempting to do, temper inflation with tight monetary policy. Rate cuts are expected to resume later this year, with investors anticipating a 0.25 percentage point reduction in September. But those odds slipped nearly 50-50 this week after the Consumer Price Index showed inflation rose up 0.3% from the prior month. So, Sam, Trump wants the Fed to do something with the rates that would dramatically boost inflation.
Well, it will definitely boost it. I mean, it depends how much it boosts. It would depend on the size of the rate cut, right? I mean, if the Fed cut rates to the extent that Trump wants them to,
1% yes. In this environment,
that would certainly dramatically boost inflation.
I mean, I am pleased that the chairman, Jerome Powell, is not just simply giving President Trump what he wants, because I don't want to experience intense inflation as a person in this economy.
Yeah, nobody does.
And the suffering that would come from that is immense, I think. But at the same time, don't you kind of want to just have Trump learn his lesson here? I mean, I guess that's the lesson, is that Trump doesn't learn lessons. But if he gets what he wants, he's going to have a complete political catastrophe on his hands, as if he doesn't already have one.
Well, that assumes that there will be democratic mechanisms that can punish him for whatever policy mistakes he might make.
I'm just saying, if he calls for 1% and inflation goes to 13% or whatever, he'll be unpopular.
Yes, it certainly will be. Now, this is, of all the stories we have, this is just as high a degree of uncertainty. For example, it broke today in the Financial Times that Trump is seeking a 15 to 20% tariff against the European Union. And markets, that is, investors, had a mild panic about this, and the stocks have fallen today on this news. And yesterday, our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, was in Tokyo meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, right? As well as, officials from their finance ministry and stuff like that. But the point is, this meeting boiled up to the point where the prime minister of the country had to be involved. And the United States and Japan seem to be at loggerheads in these trade negotiations. The United States seems to be demanding things of Japan that Japan doesn't really want to go to. And so we're going to have to see how this works out. Of course, we're supposedly have an August 1st deadline for all countries to reach some accommodation with the United States. But it doesn't seem as though that's looking likely at the moment. And I think the incident on Wednesday, when it was reported that Trump was going to fire Chairman Powell, and then again, that not only did stocks fall, as our graphic illustrates, but bond yields rose, and the dollar also fell. And these are very worrying signs inside of the United States economy. And that we believe that this is the reason Trump immediately came out and said that it was, quote, highly unlikely that he would fire Chairman Powell. And so this sort of confirms what we've come to think of as the taco trade. Trump always chickens out, right? The problem that we've been having, though, in that regard is that investors seem to think that Trump does that by himself, right? But you can't play chicken by yourself. You have to have an opponent. And that opponent is the investors themselves, right? If they want Trump to chicken out, they've got to take the ball and make him do it. And I hope they start to understand this, because it doesn't seem as though they do. They seem to believe that he's just going to do it unilaterally.
Okay, and why doesn't it seem like that, Sam? Because the market did come down when he made the threats.
Okay, but that was the first time in months, right, that they've had to, the investors actually had to take the ball and start selling off, right? Whereas Trump has made any number of ludicrous assertions for a number of months now, but investors just say, oh, well, he doesn't mean it, he doesn't mean it, he doesn't mean it. And I think that we need to understand, people, John, like you and myself, who are just Trump's political opponents, many of us have been sort of lulled into this idea that investors are our friends, and they're not. Okay, they are self-interested parties trading securities in the marketplace for reasons of their own, which in some cases will align with our motivations, but in many cases will not, right? They want to make money. And if Trump is able to keep the tariffs at a relatively reasonable rate, they figure they can still do that. It's only his most outrageous sort of goals that they object
that mess with my S&P 500.
Exactly, right? Whereas even the smaller tariffs that Trump intends to institute would have terrible effects on regular Americans, right? But they don't seem to care about that, right? They're only concerned that the tariff should not reach such a high level that they, that is the investors, can't continue to profit. That's their goal. And so there, again, sometimes their interests align with ours, but not all the time, and less, I think, than people assume they will. And so this is something that we're going to need to keep an eye on, because I think when August 1st comes around, it might be that investors suddenly realize, oh no, he actually does still intend to do these things. It almost feels, in fact, like once Trump dropped the bombs on Iran, that he felt that he had proved that he wasn't a chicken, and therefore he could go back to the exorbitant tariffs. Now,
which he did almost immediately start talking about them.
That's true, but then again, that also happened to just on the calendar coincide with the expiration of the 90-day pause that he instituted back in April. So it might just actually be a coincidence, right? But that doesn't mean that these sort of incentives that he has to prove that he's not a chicken aren't still in play. Both things can be true at the same time.
Well, we went away for 2 weeks and lots
somehow,
of interesting...
the world didn't stop turning. Yeah.
But, man. But it turned in like a very specific way that is really the whole motivation for this podcast.
Yes. I mean, and the thing that knocks me out about the market, since that's the segment we're in right now, right, is that if you look at the level of geopolitical and economic uncertainty
the S&P
in the world
hit an all-time high. I know.
They just don't care, right? they believe. And
I mean, look, again, I have an IRA. Like, I'm not going to say that it's not in my interest for the markets to be stable and chug it along. But like, I am stunned.
Yes, but then that's exactly the point I was trying to make, is that just because the whole world is going to hell doesn't mean these people don't think they can still make money. And they're probably right. Okay, that's the worst part of it, right? Is that,
or the best, Sam, depending on your perspective.
Well, I think
depending on your interests.
Yeah, right. I'm sure they think it's great, right? Yeah. But they can still just keep going to the bank, right? While everybody else suffers, and I think it's ghastly.
Well, on that light note, we'll wrap it up for this week. Let's see. Next week, what's coming, Sam? I guess we're counting down to that.
Lots of things are happening. Yeah, we will be counting down. I think there might be a Fed meeting next week, but I'm not sure.
It was intimated in the Howard Schneider piece that they were meeting next week.
There might be. But you know what? Again, all the stories we talked about this week, they're all live balls, right? And so, we might need to update all of them. But I'm certain that at least one of the three will require major updating by this time next week.
All right. Happy to be back, everybody. We'll talk next Friday. He's Sam. I'm John. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, folks.